On December 31st, 2013, the last one came off the assembly line.
The market did not kill it. A rule about brakes and airbags did.
Things you've never seen, now revealed.
This is Cars in Detail.
Every country has an object it kept building after the rest of the world moved on. Brazil had a van. The world stopped manufacturing that particular vehicle a long time ago. And in Brazil, it kept coming off the line for more than 5 decades, until December 31st, 2013, when the last one was built. And here's the part almost nobody knows. The market did not kill it. It was still selling. It was not competition. It was not fashion. It was not a missing supplier. What ended production was a vehicle safety rule that took effect in 2014, requiring an airbag and an anti-lock braking system in every new vehicle sold in the country. The van did not die of old age. It died when the country around it became safer than it could be.
To understand the size of that, you have to understand what the vehicle was there. It was manufactured in Brazil for over 50 consecutive years, spanning entire generations of the same family. It was not a niche vehicle, and it was not a collector's item while it was alive. It was infrastructure. It was an ambulance, a school bus, a delivery van, a moving truck, a band's touring vehicle, a house on wheels, and the first vehicle of thousands of small businesses that would not have existed without it. When an object performs that many functions at once, it stops being a product and becomes part of the landscape, which is why its ending made front pages in a country that rarely gives front pages to an assembly line. And building the same thing for that long has a practical consequence almost nobody lists. Any mechanic in any small town knew how to fix it. The part existed everywhere, and the knowledge of how to repair it was spread across the entire country. A vehicle becomes cheap to maintain when the country has already learned how to maintain it.
Now the mechanism, which is the interesting part. Why was it cheap to keep building a vehicle that old? Precisely because it was old. It had flat panels, an air-cooled engine, simple mechanics, and a structure that had barely changed in decades. That means tooling already paid for, an assembly line already amortized, suppliers already established, and engineering nobody needed to redo. Every additional year of production spread a cost that had been settled a very long time earlier across more units. The simplicity that made it outdated was exactly what kept it viable. It survived by being too simple to be worth improving. Hold on to that sentence, because it explains everything that happens in the rest of this video. Compare that with a new model which has to recover its development costs within a few years of sales. This one had no such clock running against it. Its design had been paid for before many of the people driving it were born. Every year after that was, in accounting terms, almost free.
And here it is worth separating two things that get confused constantly: affection and usefulness. This van did not become beloved because it was beautiful, and it was not always comfortable, quiet, or fast. It became beloved because it was present at the moments when people most needed a vehicle and could least afford one. It carried the team. It moved the apartment. It brought back the grocery. Affection for an object almost never comes from admiration. It comes from repetition, from being there many times, on occasions the person remembers. An object that appears in 1,000 small stories eventually becomes a character in all of them. And that is how an industrial van becomes a national keepsake without ever trying to.
But the same simplicity that kept it alive for 50 years had a limit. And that limit was not mechanical. It was legal. Before I tell you which rule ended production, you need to know exactly what that rule required, because that is the point where this stops being about one van and starts being about all of us.
The rule that took effect in 2014 made 2 items mandatory in every new vehicle sold in the country: an airbag and an anti-lock braking system. An airbag is the bag that inflates on impact. An anti-lock system is what stops the wheel from locking during hard braking, so the driver keeps steering control. Neither one is a luxury. Both exist because they were measured. They reduce deaths and they reduce serious injury in collisions. And it matters to be precise here because this story is usually told wrong. There was no law against this van. There was a general vehicle safety rule, identical for everyone. And this was one of the vehicles that could not get through it.
Why couldn't it? Because adapting was not a matter of bolting on a part. An airbag requires a structure designed to absorb and distribute impact in a predictable way with sensors calibrated for that specific body. An anti-lock system requires onboard electronics, a sensor at each wheel, and a control unit the vehicle never had. Fitting that to a body designed long before any of those concepts existed is not an update. It is redesigning the whole vehicle. And redesigning means throwing away exactly what made it cheap: the paid-off tooling, the old engineering, the amortized line, The moment it had to become modern, it would stop being inexpensive. And without being inexpensive, it had no reason to exist at all.
The manufacturer then did something that says a great deal about what the object had become. It built a final commemorative run of 1,200 units with its own trim to mark the ending. 1,200 units is a small number for an automotive industry and an enormous one for a goodbye. Companies do not build farewell editions for ordinary products. They build them for products that turned into symbols, and they knew it. The final unit from the line went to a museum in Germany, in the city where the mark was born. It is a strange and exact image at once. The most Brazilian vehicle that ever worked those roads ended its life as an archive piece on the other side of the Atlantic. And one detail usually slips past. The farewell run was not built to sell better. It was built to record. A manufacturer that spends assembly line time on 1,200 goodbye units is saying in industrial language that the object had stopped being inventory and had become memory.
And what came afterwards was not a replacement. It was an entire market rearranging itself. The functions the van had accumulated: light cargo, school transport, passenger van, a base for conversions, were divided among different vehicles, each more expensive than it was, each safer than it was, and none of them able to do everything it did. That is not a romantic loss. It is a trade. The country exchanged one cheap, versatile, fragile object for expensive, specialized, safe ones. Whoever was transporting children gained from that trade in a way you can measure in lives. Whoever ran a small business and bought a used one to get started lost an entry step that was never rebuilt. And that entry step matters more than it sounds. A cheap used vehicle is how a great many people enter self-employment. An old van, a license, and a route.
And it is fair to state the other side with equal clarity because this channel does not exist to be nostalgic. The safety rule was not a whim. Airbags and anti-lock brakes are among the items with the best documented effect on road deaths. And a country that manufactures vehicles without them is exporting the cost to the hospital and to the family. The van was charming and it was fragile, and both were true at the same time. What was lost was real. So was what was gained. Anyone telling this story only through affection is hiding the half that involves injured people, and anyone telling it only through regulation is pretending it cost nothing to the people who depended on it. The honest position is to hold both facts at once, without letting either one comfort you.
And that is why this channel looks at the car in detail, rather than at the legend of the car. This van lasted more than 50 years for a reason nobody would have written into a business plan. It was too simple to be worth modernizing and too cheap to be worth retiring. It survived in the blind spot between obsolete and indispensable. And it ended on the day the country decided that safety is not an optional extra, a decision about every vehicle. Not about that one. Its ending was not the end of a product. It was the date on which it became visible that the standard had changed, and that an object which had crossed 5 decades was not going to cross this one.
If there was one of these in your family, tell me in the comments what it carried. I would bet it was not cargo. If this gave you a part of the story you did not know, a like helps somebody else find it. And subscribe, because the next one is about the other vehicle a country refused to let die. The one that stopped being manufactured in 1986, returned to the assembly line 7 years later by request, and then ended again, that time for good.